Mainstream media usually presents UFO news as fringe stories for weirdos, but the media has gone UFO mad in the past week, reporting on sightings and events as serious news events. Given that we know mainstream media takes orders from the global elite, and any shift in the narrative must be viewed with deep suspicion, the question must be asked: why have the media changed their narrative so dramatically? According to a World Economic Forum insider, it's yet another case of so-called conspiracy theorists being one step ahead of the rest of the world. But before we explain what the UFO sightings are really about, please subscribe to The People's Voice if you appreciate our content, and feel free to join the People's Voice Locals community if you want to join our new community of like-minded people determined to hold the globalist elite to account for their crimes against humanity. The link is in the description box below. I hope to see you there. Now, let's take a look at the social conditioning taking place on mainstream networks as they prepare the masses for the global elitists' latest and greatest mass con. Always in the vanguard of the globalist agenda, CNN have been dedicated an unprecedented number of minutes per day to UFO news.
Interesting. This is kind of unusual that these pilots saw different things, and that is sort of, I guess, adding to the mystery of all this.
Yeah, not even the pilots apparently were really able to identify what they saw. And just to take you back for a sec, on Thursday, the U.S. defense officials sent F-35 fighter jets up to try to figure out what this object was that was flying around near Alaska. Those pilots, we have learned, have given very conflicting accounts of what they actually experienced, with some pilots saying that the object interfered with the plane's sensors, other pilots saying that they didn't really experience that, other pilots saying that when they looked at the object, they could identify no identifiable propulsion system, and they did not know how it was actually staying in the air, cruising at that altitude of about 40,000 feet. So this has all added to the Pentagon's wariness of describing in more detail what this object actually is until they can get more information through the debris.
In recent days, we've had reports of UFOs all over the world. On February the 2nd, the Chinese balloon was spotted, and on February the 4th, it was shot down. Then, 6 days later, a UFO was shot down over Alaska.
Footage of the UFO shot down over Alaska.
Bank one, blast one.
Could we have shot down an extraterrestrial craft?
And the very next day, on February the 11th, a UFO was shot down over Canada. And in recent days, we've had UFOs appear all over China and Uruguay. And then Montana's airspace was closed for DoD activities. On February the 12th, a UFO was shot down over Lake Huron. While the mainstream media has only just started taking these events seriously and conditioning the masses, it's no secret that world governments have been taking these events very seriously for years. Whether they are trying to make psychic spies or track unidentified flying objects, governments have a history of trying to hunt down the truth behind the bizarre sightings and events reported each year. But according to two well-placed sources, these recent events are more than just cover-up attempts. The world government is planning a supernatural event of its own. According to reputable sources, the government are going to fake a global alien invasion in the year 2024 in order to usher in a one-world government. Here's where it gets really interesting. In his 1994 book, Project Bluebeam, investigative journalist Serge Monast writes that the United Nations, NASA, and other government agencies have been working in secret since 1983 on a top-secret operation called Project Bluebeam. The purpose? To pave the way for a global government by fooling people into thinking it's the end of the world. Here's how it works, according to Mr. Monast. First, the global elite will fake an alien invasion, convincing the world that aliens are planning to take over major cities across the globe. Second, religious populations will be treated to a rapture or fulfillment of their religion's prophecies. This will all be fake, conducted through the use of large-scale holograms and microchips hidden within most modern electronics.
In 2024, a global event will alter the course of mankind's future. The world will stand witness to a massive alien invasion. Thousands of projected holographic alien warships will blanket the skies, sending people into a global panic. Real military crafts within the holograms will inflict actual damage to the surrounding areas to sell the gimmick.
Once the various nations of the world topple under the mass of civil unrest and panic, the New World Order will assert itself, and the people of the world, desperate for any sort of authority, will accept its rule. The notorious globalist Henry Kissinger let the cat out of the bag about the plan in the late 70s. Kissinger, who is Klaus Schwab's mentor, explained in clear terms how the globalists will convince Americans to accept the New World Order. He wrote, "Today Americans would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told that there was an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all the peoples of the world will pledge with world leaders to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by their world government." Kissinger wasn't the only insider in the late 70s speaking about how the elite will attempt to hijack humanity and brute force the world government upon them. Werner von Braun, the German and US aerospace engineer who worked on Operation Paperclip, confessed on his deathbed in 1977 that the global elites were planning to use terrorists and pandemics as false flags to manipulate and control the masses. Even more interestingly, von Braun said that the final false flag will be a fake alien invasion. The global elites engineered a crisis with the COVID pandemic to erode the sovereignty of nations and terrify the masses into compliance, and they half succeeded. But as anyone who has been paying attention to the disturbing rhetoric coming out of Davos recently will know, the global elite are not done with us yet. It appears that COVID was the dress rehearsal and they have an even greater con up their sleeves. So what should we be doing to stay alert and ensure they don't get away with the plan? Mr. Monast provided details about exactly how the global elite will perpetrate the con. He stated that NASA will use low-frequency electromagnetic waves to communicate telepathically and that the New World Order will phase out cash. At the time, skeptics had several issues with this conspiracy theory. First and foremost, the technology required to inundate the world with realistic visions of aliens and messiahs simply didn't exist in the early 1990s. But fast forward to our present age and all of the futuristic tech that Mr. Monast spoke about has been rolled out by the elite in recent years. There is no doubt that the global elite have the technology to pull off the con. We do know that the US government briefly entertained the idea of using a hologram during the Iraq War. US Air Force planners brainstorming on the best way to achieve a bloodless coup in Iraq proposed creating a giant hologram that would appear to be Allah commanding Iraqis to overthrow Saddam Hussein. This plan was never implemented, but the fact it was even considered at such a high level proves that the technology exists. Microchips, holograms, electromagnetic waves for telepathic communication. It's uncanny how everything Monast wrote about in 1994 has been rolled out by the World Economic Forum in the last couple of years. Skeptics at the time also questioned whether governments across the world could really cooperate and coordinate closely enough to pull off this mass con. But again, everything Monast wrote about in his book has come to pass. The World Economic Forum has penetrated governments all over the world, placing its own people in the highest offices in the land, in Canada, New Zealand, France and Brazil, to name just a few countries.
That we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are for our actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
In 2023, there is no question that governments across the world could coordinate closely enough to pull off a mass con. We've already seen it happen with the COVID pandemic. The global elite had governments and mainstream media singing from the same hymn sheet. Mr. Monast was said to be writing a new book with bombshell further information regarding government plans for Project Bluebeam. However, he was